an artist and is able to actually produce the music that you necessarily want. Few framings to understand this. Number one, understand that this particular celebrity or idol already has an established platform, which means it looks like the current fan base. Or number two, that the group already highlights on the differences that they have and necessarily has galvanized this to have a platform. So they will be popular regardless on both sides. The difference here is that what matters should be the flexibility and the agency they have as an artist. Why is this agency winning us the debate? Number one, this is the reason they became an artist itself. But number two, you can also putting yourself out there with being tied, and this necessarily proves how agency is there. But the second framing here, advertising your solo career necessarily look like as an individual member, you had a lot of talent as a composer, as a writer, as a dancer, as an actor, or even as a rapper. What this means, your career allows you to acquire at the point you're not tied within the circumstances of your group. This looks like Bang Yedam starting as a singer for Treasure and deciding to pursue because this is something that he wants as an agency. But B, you can still continue with your group activity, right? It looks like reunions or comebacks and necessarily become it is there, like Wonder Girls or essentially even Girls' Generation. This can still exist regardless. What this proves here is that necessarily we do take a trade-off that maybe you have lesser group activities, but it's not on your own, but it's not impeding on the incentives that you have for yourself. What opposition then needs to defend is the different circumstances for every group member, and you are still sticking with something that is so uncertain. Two arguments I'll bring in for today. The first is that the group activities strip your agency as an artist, but the second argument is simply on how you're much popular as a solo artist. The first one on the group activities strips your agency. The framing here is that your ability to flourish as an artist is continuously tied to the group activities. You just have to prove the harm then. Number one, the rules that necessarily exist as a group. So you have to continuously abide to the schedules, the concepts that are continuously changing, how you appear in public, that you have to continuously be respectful to everyone there, or like the hours of training that you necessarily need to put in because it's a bigger group. The impact here is that you don't have any sort of agency and you're unable to call out the differences that you feel within the group because you think that this is the only way that you can essentially establish a career by sticking with your group. The second important thing here is that you have to always care about the perception of your group first. But this is a problem at the point in which the other group members are doing this to you. This looks like Sunghyun with the continuous affairs happening in Big Bang, where you have to continuously have to agree with this person, or you have to have the effects of drawbacks from the fans necessarily when they do something bad. The impact here is that even if you try to be your very best, you still have members who necessarily maybe not prioritize this, and it harms you significantly. The third thing is the uncertainty of your group in the future. It looks like two things, right? Number one, that you have that your members have to go for military service simply because of the age that they are put in. Like all the members need to do this necessarily. This becomes a problem because the groups need to be on hiatus at the point in which this happens. It looks like necessarily like DO from EXO and he has to go away, even though the members have an activity, but necessarily it's still uncertain to how many people are going to go to military. But number two, you have to always focus on other members as the focus of other members exists as well. It looks like the livelihood that they have. It looks like probably the members getting married, or essentially that they have solo careers that they also want to prioritize. Looks like Kai and Jenny within even big K-pop groups. But number four, they have a limited capacity in the creative control that they have. And we think this is important to highlight because necessarily as an artist, you ought to prioritize things you want to produce on your own terms. It looks like wanting to stick with the concept that you essentially resonate with and the most proximate, right? The conclusion here are two things. Number one, the ability as an artist is continuously limited. So at the point in which a solo artist, you become a lot more beneficial because you're not tied to the harms I said just now. But number two, every success you have is only tied to your group. So you have a sense of identity that is necessarily gone at the point in which things do not go align with what you necessarily want. Comparative here, four things. Number one, you're deciding things on your own time. It looks like the schedule, how you will necessarily do it, the activities that you necessarily will participate. But number two, you're not dependent on others' actions or others' reputation. It's simply an agency that you have yourself. Number three, you're able to continue the particular life that you have because you're already popular. So you galvanize this with your own fan base from the group, and this is important and this is good already. But number four, you can make your own art, and there isn't actually a harm that necessarily is pushed upon you to stick to only one. Conclusion here is that you feel flourish simply because you have this agency, and we ought to prioritize this as an artist. Before I move on, yep, appeal. 3, 2.
So basically, basically, even if you do solo, insofar as you are bound to contract, probably the company is still going to try to like control the schedule and try to confirm the like type of like
Yeah, I'll engage with that in my second argument, why you're going to be much popular as a solo artist, and also flag out why the company would not impede this entirely. I think the framing here is that you continuously impede the benefit of the profit and popularity that you have. Notice panel, this is very important. They say from the POI that the company will abuse you regardless, right? This is important to note because at the point in which you as an artist and you are galvanizing the platform or the fan base that you have, you actually have a bigger leverage towards the company rather than being a group that necessarily has to abide to them entirely. But number one, you become less popular over time, right? This is important because you have popularity now, but the absence of the constant activities from the hiatus of your groups mean that you do not have this particular leverage. This impacts, number one, how you have lower views or spotlights within the particular shows that exist. But number two, there are less people who necessarily is there, so you don't have enough galvanization of current members anyway. The comparative here is that number one, you have a competitive advantage where you're able to borrow the spotlight from the group, but you profit out of this and you kind of like galvanize this particularly. So maybe the cake is small, but you have the cake by yourself. But number two, in terms of profit, this is very much important. We think that K-pop groups like NCT, where they keep on bringing in like new members and the group is super duper huge, means that there's always an abuse in an industry because a lot of people take away the profit of the percentage and you have to continuously divide this within your group members. Notice at the point in which you're able to actually take this profit by yourself, and so even if the companies take a big part of it, you still necessarily have a significant amount of this percentage rather than dividing this with all of your members. With that said, I've proven to you necessarily why it's important for you to like understand it's to become a solo artist, and this is necessarily why we win this debate.
I thank the speaker for the fine remarks. I now invite the LO.
Hello, confirming if I'm visible and audible.
Yes, you are.
Thank you. My name is Sunghyun, preferred gender pronouns are he and him. And POI chat, please. My speech begins in 3, 2, 1. To clarify the burden of each side of the house, I think government said properly identifies their burden. Basically, they actually have to trade off their group activity for the sake of solo activity. So basically, even if the members who are in the military service come back to your group, probably you would not be able to do the group activity as often as possible. But certainly, the house under your also during the military service period, obviously, I think there is an incentive for corporations to allow you to do things like solo activities. For example, your entertainment company want to make profit, and if group activity itself is impossible, probably then you probably have to like do things like solo activity in order for you to generate profit. But even if it is impossible under our side of the house, probably we are proposing like unique activity, for example, like two max members, like for example, Cheng, like this is a very subunit of EXO, which allows like members to actually like continue on their activity even when some members are in the military. I think activity within the group activity, when you are doing that activity, your solo activity can also be integrated to some extent. If there are more than 10 songs within your full album, probably or 1 or 2 songs can actually be made by you, or 1 or 2 songs can be actually like your solo song, and solo song, or things like concert having during your concert, you can actually have a solo special stage. This is very possible because of 3 reasons. See, there is a market incentive to look for new things because you actually want to get like new image, and those type of solo activities are going to be something that is going to be seen as novel and new. You also want to like your self-actualization to a certain extent, right? Because people support you and people like you, and therefore they are going to support to a certain extent. But in my argument, I'm going to explain to you as to why these fans are going to feel the sense of betrayal if you prioritize your solo activities. So I think that's going to be the tipping point. But the last thing is that it just because like basically in the K-pop industry, probably there is a certain type of like narrative and certain type of norm that K-pop artists actually making their own songs is something that's preferable. For example, in G Idol, probably Soyeon making their own songs is very being valued in the industry. Probably this means that the corporation and the companies are giving more and more education and trying more and more training about even like making their own songs or whatnot, and try to like mix songs and try to popularize these songs even on a group basis, which means that I think they're very asymmetrical under their side. To talk about this, that's why you're going to lose popularity. Because I think your popularity is mostly based on your group activities. So see, members actually have diverse strengths. For example, some members are good in vocals, some are good in dance or rap, or like they're just like basically handsome. That's the reason as to why when you do the group activity, you are making a unique mixture of that. To that, when you actually do the solo activity, see, you are one person actually have only one particular strength, which means that there is less amount of ability for you to actually make a lot of diverse type of strengths at the end of the day. Second thing is that in group activities, you can actually try out diverse concepts all of the diversity. For example, you can try a different genre, but you can actually remember with the different members from like different types of activities that you do. So the reason that's why the spectrum of the concept that you can try about in a group activity is much wider and much diverse in comparison to what you can do in a solo activity. That's why I think people are going to get more desensitized on your side of the house. Probably you're going to do similar things again and again. Members, I say things about all members, because people at different states, different pace, people are going to have their different biases about who they like the most in the certain group. So for example, in BTS, probably if you like Jungkook the most, you are not going to be as interested in the solo activity of Suga because that particular member is not necessarily your bias. So basically, it's basically you're going to buy some albums, so not buying more albums to the extent that you would have bought when they have done the like solo like group activity. They're not going to like actively like stream your music video or whatnot. The thing is that I think like basically under their side of the house, when they talk about music agency, basically you're going to just usually do what you want. I mean, that's not necessarily going to be something that is the most like most people are going to like at the end of the day. So, for example, like J-Hope and Suga, which are the members of BTS, actually kind of brought up a very like hard hip hop type of like song that is very, very not much popular in the realm, and that's why like their like Billboard like charts was not there. The ranking was not that high. The music video views were not that high, and that's why I think under their side of the house, the overall popularity decreases. I think this is very important because this means that you are going to have a concert in a smaller stadium. You're going to have less amount of ticket sales, less amount of album sales, less amount of music video views. People are not going to call you for broadcasting like shows or whatnot because you're less popular. There's less reason to look up to you. So even if you get this particular so even you actually get this perception that you are like kind of like falling sun and you're in the downwards curve at the end of the day. And success is quite much very important metric for you as government already conceded. As far as I apologize when you lose the popularity, I think we are already winning this debate. But the second thing I'm going to notice is you're going to lose significant support base. Fans are going to have backlashes. There are two reasons for this. Number one, notice that fans have waited for over 2 years for a full group activity as far as the inputs that already states. But some members in the group have already like doing things like military services, which means that there has been a very like vacant like duration that there was no activity, which means that they are desperately waiting for that. And secondly, I think the fans who have liked this particular group would have liked this particular group for a very long period of time, especially when they are considering the re-contract, which means that the contract is like basically like about like 7 years, which means that they have like this particular group for a longer time, which means that I think the priority of the fans are going to be the group activity that they have waited for so long. And that's what people are going to be from the moment when they say that I'm going to prioritize my solo activity because they have waited for you with the trust that you will be back joining the group. I think this is a very, very bad thing because now fans are going to antagonize you. They're going to do things like comments and like they like terror your like Instagram or Facebook or whatnot. These impacts are massive. Number one, notice that K-pop industry is operating in a very intimate and personal connection basis. For example, using Weavers chatting or bubble chatting that you literally you're chatting out of order. You're literally doing a chat with your fan base. So basically, you can actually access all the things that fans are saying to you. That's why this is going to cause a lot of mental harm. Excuse notice that fans are the ones who have supported you no matter what. You make your mistakes, fans accept that this is okay, this is something you could have done. So I think these people are a very important support base from the moment when these people are now changing their stance against you, and now trying to quickly antagonize you, the level degree of the mental damage that you get is substantially bigger than any other people at the end of the day. So what does that mean? I think all the members of are going to get bored. There are three reasons for this. Number one, Koreans actually have a very strong communitarian value, which means that a lot of members are still going to prioritize that, but to prioritize the activity. Secondly, they also prioritize the relationship with fans and try to be loyal to their fans or whatnot. And thirdly, there might be some like less popular members at the end, which means that a lot of members are going to be pissed off you and say that you're going to prioritize your solo career as well, which means that you're also going to lose your support base. All these reasons, very, very proposed.
I thank the speaker for the final remarks. I now invite DPM. DPM, are you here?
Different.
Yeah, sorry. I'm here. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
You.
I'll take you guys through chat. Excuse me. Opposition's counter proposal is to have smaller subunits in a much larger group. The problem is that this is a concession and a cop-out.
Yeah.
They concede that agency is somewhat important, that's why you want to give smaller autonomy to a single subunit of a group. What I have to do now is just weigh out why the stripping of agency relatively on opposition exacerbates the harm that they themselves concede is a bad thing. We're going to do that later in my speech. A couple of things. Firstly, I'll prove to you the difference between being in as a solo artist and a group. Secondly, I'll prove to you that bias culture means that you become more successful on a scale when you become a solo artist. Lastly, I'll give you an argument as to how solo activities, at the very least, increase the propensity for that particular group to survive throughout the 2-year hiatus. Before that, let's look at the cop-out coming from Op. Says, let's have smaller subunits in a bigger group. This is a cop-out. And the reason for that is that they concede that to some extent, this smaller group would have some level of autonomy, right? So they can do their own scheduling themselves, which means that agency is somewhat important. That is quite contingent on the company allowing you to do that. But unfortunately, for the vast majority of companies, they rely on the group as an identity, but not your subunits, which is exactly why more often than not, these smaller subunits don't become popular as well. This is also not really engaging with the first argument, because our argument in first wasn't really to say that this entire group was to argue that this entire group in general would suffer more at the point in which when they are still in that group by virtue of you having to depend on each other. This still happens if you're in a subunit, because perhaps you're in a subunit of 2 or 3, you're still dependent on other people's schedules, you're still dependent on other people's time and reputation, which means that at any point your other members fall off, you fall off as well. This not only means that you fall off in a sinking ship that you don't really necessarily like, but secondly, you also lose profit in the long run. That is the harm the opposition has to defend. The second thing, let's weigh out agency, because they concede that agency is stripped as that side of the house. We think the agency is harmful because these are artists who literally care so much about their craft. They don't feel happy. So perhaps opposition can argue that these groups are quite strong together, but even if they're not the success of your group is not a success of you as a solo artist, but it's the success of your group, which means that you will never really feel satisfied. You will never feel that you have done something in this world because you're relying on other people's reputation. So even if it's subunit or whatever, we think that you will still feel unhappy. As an artist, we have to prioritize ourselves because our happiness means that we avoid things like spiraling out of control. That's exactly why K-pop artists are particularly more susceptible to things like depression, because even though you have a lot of money, you feel good at that money because you don't really like what you're doing. It happens way more on opposition. Let's deal with bias culture. Opposition says that because of bias culture, there's a likelihood that you'll become unsuccessful, and bias culture, people will probably not like you. A couple of to this. Firstly, this is intimidatory. What if you are the one who the fan base loves? What if you are the one that has bias on? It means that if you are Jenny or if you're Kai, you make millions and billions of profit on a comparative. But still, this is dismissal because the argument of spotlighting already happens. Because number one, the framing is already popular with the group, which already meant that if you were considering this as a solo career, you already knew that it was kind of viable. If not, you won't transcend into poverty if you leave, which means that this is not a big deal. But secondly, and this is new material, companies see this as a new market. Of course, people want, these companies would want you to become a solo career because you're diversifying your audience. You're finding your own sound. If you're a musician, if you're an artist, if you're a radio host, whatever it is, you're diversifying your options. Clamor at this opportunity. But lastly, let's disprove why fans will actually will hate on you, because they won't. Fans will love it if you become a solo artist for three reasons. Firstly, real fans will stay loyal to the group because of just surely because of the fan base and fan culture. Assuming that this particular fan loves the group as a whole, they also love these individual artists. But secondly, why would they hate on this single artist? Because at any point they hate on a single artist, the other members of that group go and defend the person, which means even if opposition says that some fans maybe on a scale would attack you, other people will always defend you. We think by sheer number, the fans who hate you are a minority. But thirdly, we think that this diversifies and increases your fan base. So perhaps some fans will lose out, but we create more fans on a scale because you can diversify and find your own sound. That is that opposition's case is over. I'll pick up your if there's any.
So basically, even if there might be some like best case of fans who are very, very loyal to you, probably there are also going to be a lot of light fans who are going to be pissed by you betraying your own group.
Okay, but I approved to you that's the minority, and I also disproved why that won't happen because of fan culture and how they'll have loyalty towards the group and their group. Argument then on our solo activities increases the likelihood of survivability. The first premise to this argument, how you will have to be in a hiatus. Three reasons for this. Number one, if you're in a group that, as the info slide says, other people are also leaving the group because they have to go for military service, which is a minimum of 2 years, at the very least, you will at least shrink the number of people or shrink the number of fans as well for a minimum of 2 years until they come back. Yeah. But secondly, it's speculative if they do come back or not. So perhaps it's more than just a few members and other people still stay, but we're already entering to the end stages of that contract. Other people might opt out of that contract. We don't know. But thirdly, you will obviously get a lack of promotion and airtime by the company because a lot of companies have a lot of different K-pop groups that they have to allocate resources to. So look at you as a group that's going through internal turmoil. Probably this company is not going to care about you, care about other companies. What this proves is, at best, there will be a minimum of 2 years where you're not producing any new music, where you're not really making generated content, you're really not doing much, right? We think this is harmful because number one, 2 years is devastating to your relevance in the market. New groups consistently pop out. Yeah. K-pop is culture, which means that you need airtime every single time that you get. And if you don't get airtime, and if airtime is minimal, you lose and you fall off. You get less resources from not only from the fan base, people don't go to your shows. Secondly, when you have less content, companies don't give you resources. They platform you less. They use their marketing tools for other K-pop groups that are within that company. So maybe you stay, but you get less support from that company, which is literally directly tied to the amount of money that you make. Fan base decrease. The sheer quantity of K-pop means fan base is separated, and it's an opportunity cost, right? You can't watch every single K-pop group. You can't go to every single K-pop group, which means that you need to prioritize the groups that you feel the most have the most affinity to. This results in you having to prioritize consistency. What we prove here is that your solo career matters the most, and you ought to prioritize yourself in these times of need and in these times of crisis. For all those reasons, we have to take.
I thank the speaker for the final remarks. I now invite the DLO.
Hello, can I be seen and heard? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Like 5 seconds to set up my timer and then I'll start. First call out I just want to is that K-pop and other art careers oftentimes have vastly different paths. That's why, for example, a lot of K-pop artists oftentimes start very young. They oftentimes concede to very strict rules for 10 to 12 years before they can become a career. What these things mean is that the moment in which you're able to become an artist, or the moment in which you put in all the effort to become a K-pop artist, is the moment in which you've already implicitly conceded that your utmost priority is to succeed, your utmost priority is to succeed as a K-pop artist, which is why we think the weird weighing, saying that your artistic freedom, like going doing indie music, is the most relevant priority, because presumably it isn't, based on the fact that this person chose this particular career path, which is a lot harder than the other ones and more competitive, given that the market's really saturated, compared to other, for example, becoming indie artists, for instance, because presumably if you straight went into the indie artist path, maybe you could have had more artistic talent, but you wouldn't have as much success, which is why it disproves that the weighing here is, if you want to weigh between success and agency, success is the more important one. But secondly, they keep accusing us of saying that we also agree to agency. No, what we're saying is, firstly, success is probably the most important metric here. But what we were essentially doing was, we were saying that even if you buy their narrative, which we don't think is something that's true, that agency is the most important one, that we get far more agency, and that's the weighing that we were trying to do. First, they were essentially against a contract because no things like schedules, rules are just characteristics of a contract. But second, oftentimes I would posit that agency comes after success, which is also another reason as to why success is an overarching narrative. Because if you're not successful, for example, you don't have a lot of options later on when you're choosing your next company, for example. Second, because if you're not successful, you have more pressure from a company to conform to certain things, to do certain things, and you don't have that leeway because if you're not successful, the company isn't really valuing you, which is why the company is not going to listen to you when you say, I want to do this concept, for example, I want to do this schedule, for example, which is why success is something that is first and then agency comes afterwards. Thirdly, they said that other people are going to opt out. Look, I just want to point out that this is really uncharitable. If everyone in the group all just points out, this motion is really irrelevant because the group's not going to exist in the first place. But second, we explain to you why even if some members opt out, the group is still capable of functioning. But the company can always, for example, take the remaining members and keep pushing the albums, for example. We don't think this is going to be a significant enough harm to say that our group is going to like fall over the moment in which one or two people leave. The next thing to say is that oftentimes we think that less artistic freedom happens in two things. Firstly, because I think the best case on government is them pursuing concepts and arts that I previously couldn't do. There are two ways in which that can happen. One, this is probably like niche art, for example, or two, this is a radically different concept. Note, for example, maybe I had like a boy band concept before, and then I want to turn to sexy, for example, in my individual career. On both, I think the likelihood of you being more successful becomes lower. Because if it is niche, for example, you can target less people. If it is radically different, this is not what your fans consume you for, which is why your fans are not likely to stay just comparatively less. So I think the weighing here is maybe they might claim that new fans might exist to a certain extent, but I think the loss in fans is a lot more certain, which is what I think this directly connects to a loss in revenue. What does it mean? I think this exact means your company that you turn to, or the new company that you have, will eventually coercing you into changing back your art, for example, to changing your concept to something that will appeal to a wider majority. Because and oftentimes companies can do that because one, you're bound by long-term contracts like 7 years minimum. But number two, if you're not earning a lot of revenue, you're not very important to the company, which is why the company has a lot more say over the sort of art that you do in the long run, which is I think the best case on their side is maybe agency for a couple of years, and then that agency is gone the moment in which you're not able to create the same amount of revenue that the company hired you for. how much freedom do you get on our side? Look, I would just posit that as you get older and like accumulate fan base, you have more agency because you have more bargaining chips under your side. Number two, you can still do things like, for example, composing 1 or 2 songs within a large album. That's still some agency that we can get. Number three, we think oftentimes fans are advocates. So if you openly say on like social media, for example, that sometimes I want to try these new concepts, I think your fans are also willing to tell your company that sometimes I want to see these guys doing it in like one of our concerts in the store. We think you get some agency. I think the conclusion of this analysis over here is that agency is probably symmetric to a large extent, or I think it is worse on their side. Second, even if this agency is something that we lose, why do we think career is more important? And we get that. Firstly, on success, we think oftentimes fans consume the group, not just one person. But second, I think the best case on your side would be you would be able to pull your fans, like the people whose biases are you, but not necessarily the biases of other fans. The reason for this is because oftentimes, if fans are really, really loyal as what the government tells us, then presumably they would probably be very loyal to the group to the extent that they will be able to oppose or willing to oppose things that actively harm the group. You know what you're doing by leaving the group? You're actively harming the group. Second, they said other members will defend you. Obviously not, because other members have a self-interest not to defend someone who have actively harmed you. But even if leaving didn't directly harm, I think it also leads to indirect harms. Insofar as, for example, the media has an incentive to sensationalize this, and the media wants to create controversies around it, which is why I think directly and indirectly the group is being harmed, which is why I don't think your fan base would have a very favorable incentive in turn to you. That's why your fans not going to support you. It is more likely for you to demonize. I think the likelihood is quite clear. Before I move on, go.
Even as a K-pop artist, your goals may change over time. Why are you pigeonholing yourself?
Yeah, so I think that is contingent on you first proving that you can get long-term agency. Maybe you want to try different concepts. We explained why in the long run, that's still possible to a certain extent, right? You have to first prove why your degree of success is so large on your side, which you have no fiat, by the way, to prove that you get agency in the first place, right? You can't just claim that agency is the most important without proving why you get agency in the first place. Next, we explained to you that oftentimes this also leads to a lot of mental health problems because this is probably going to ruin your relationship with your other members, for instance. This is primarily really important because these people are really important because they've trained for you for 10 to 12 years. They're personally important for you. Number two, they understand you best. So they're the person you can turn to in times of mental health crises because they understand the struggles that you went through. For example, thirdly, on mental health, oftentimes, fan bases are really toxic, which is why, for instance, things like betrayals are seen as things that are really bad. They're more likely to demonize you. And I think the impact of this is that this is likely to have a long-term cumulative impact because the fact of the matter is in Korea, there's a large demand for you to do things like live exchanges with your fans. This means that you obviously have to, or there's a large demand for you to constantly be on things like V Live, do things like Instagram Live. That means that you have to always do a lot of two-way communications with fans. In those moments, you're likely to accumulate a lot of bad comments from your fans, bad words, for example, which accumulates and stresses you over time, which we think also ruins your mental health. We think you prove, one, you're more likely to be successful on our side. Two, you have more guaranteed and long-term agency, which means that you can better adjust to maybe your changing priorities later on. Number three, we explained your mental health is better. We're so proud to oppose.
I thank the speaker for the fan remarks. I now invite the government whip.
I'm visible.
Yes, you are.
I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. When 3 of the members from Winner left Winner because they have to go for military service, they left Mino alone. And Mino couldn't actually form a subunit because he's alone, but he still managed to actually create a diverse album. And the album that he created was one of like the best album in 2021. I didn't rate that. It was actually the K-pop industry that one who rated that because of the fact how diverse it is. He includes EDM, he includes rap, he includes ballad, he includes all of those things that could not have been included within Winner's album because Winner album has never been about what Mino wants. It's always been about what the 4 of the group's members want, which limits the ability for Mino to actually win the album itself, win the album of the year, which is why we prefer Mino to be alone. 4 things I want to address before I move on to 3 of my issue. First, I want to know on our side of the house, what exactly the trade-off, right? Sure, maybe we'll have like a lesser groups of activity. They push to us that we have to leave the group. I guess I can also prove to you that it's fine for you to leave the group, but I just want to know the realistic version of like this debate is where like people will still promote alone or like do solo activities, but they still also be part of the group, which is why we see a lot of like Mino still promote and also other groups. For example, like GD and also Taeyang, they do their own solo activities and still be part of the group until the group are able to actually promote again with their group's member, which is why that's not really the trade-off, but I'm still willing to actually to take that trade-off just to be charitable. The second thing I want to know is that this unique thing is very weird from that side of the house for a couple of reasons. One, they did not actually engage with the fact that all the harms about being part of the group will still exist. Even if you have a subunit of two groups, that means that your ability to actually be creative or like your agency is still limited because you have to like depends on or like you have to discuss with the other members. If it's a 3 subunit, you still have to discuss with 3 members. The point here is that when there is a group, there's a lot of people that you have to take into consideration that limits your ability to actually work on yourself and give what you actually want. That's the problem that we talk about, that they did not engage. But no, subunit is also problematic based on their argument. They said that there will be no popularity that exists. On your side of the house, if you have a subunit, the groups also will reduce in terms of popularity based on your argument, which means that you cannot co-opt that. If your argument is about like changing like the able to like try new style on our side of the house, we can also try new style, which means that subunit at best symmetrical, at worst the harm will still manifest on that side of the house. The third thing that they say is that we have to measure it by success. Question, what exactly the success on your side of the house? I'm not entirely sure, because is it popularity? Is it the amount of money that you make? Is it the amount of album that you're going to make? Subunit is not going to make as much album. There's only a lot of like sort of like K-pop group. There will be only one the K-pop group of the year, which means it's very hard for you to measure success. So success is very subjective in nature. The best way for you to actually measure in this debate and the best metric is that what exactly this artist really want. And this artist, based on their arguments, is that this artist want to do art. And that means that we allow them to do what actually they want, which is why it's far better on our side of the house. Finally, your argument is about company's contract. I just wanted to use this is very easy. I'm going to flip you. If you are part of the company who are very abusive and you're still part of your groups, you cannot opt out because that means that you have to disband your group. On our side of the house, working alone means that you are able to opt out of that abusive company. And that's how BI are able to opt out of YG, because of the fact that he did solo activity rather than being part of the group of Icon. Why, like in terms of abusive company, we're able to opt out much better. 3 issues. First, popularity of the artist. I just want to note that this is a weird clash. I'm just dealing with their best case scenario here, because note that they did not actually explain to you why exactly popularity matters. At best, they just say, but it's about the success, right? Here's how exactly you are able to maintain your success and popularity on our side of the house. I just want to deal with their argument about like you are going to be demonized because of the fact that you are not going to be part of your group. Unless you are very controversial to a point where you are being like there's a like lawsuit against you like Seungri, a lot of fans will still defend you. So maybe there will be one fan who will be like, oh, screw Seungri or screw Taeyang for doing a solo artist. But the problem is there will be 5 different people who will be like, you are not VIP for the you are going against Taeyang. You should love them. And this is very important because they are the one who actually be part of the group. And secondly, just note as well, because like, you are able to leverage from the fan base, that means that you continuously are able to increase like your popularity based on your fan base. But thirdly, your members will still support you. Even if you have a bias, literally a lot of like your members will literally tell their friends, go support our members. They are literally the one who carrying our groups right now. Go support them. And that means that you are able to increase your popularity. Fourth, the fact that you have the bias, by the way, this is Syakir's response, is that you probably be the bias. But finally, it's the fact that you are able to try a new style. That means that you're able to get a lot of these things. The conclusion is very simple. Popularity will still be exist on our side of the house. There's no reason to believe that their popularity will be decreased on our side of the house. They did not prove that. What is the impact? Their impact is to suggest that there will be a smaller concert on our side of the house. One, I already disproved to you that the smaller concert will not exist or not happen because of the fact that your popularity will still significantly be huge, even if it's not equal to the amount of like the group activity. It's still enough for you to be popular. But secondly, why exactly does matter? Your main concern is to actually like, produce what you actually love. Even if you have a very small concert, but you're able to give out the song that you really love, that you already crafted for a very long time, that's what makes you feel like an artist. That's what makes you feel happy, which is why like popularity doesn't really matter in this debate as long as you don't have your agency, which is why this issue doesn't really matter. Before I move on to the most important issue that we win clearly, I'll take that PR.
So whilst agency is so much important, insofar as you could have just been an indie artist under your side of the house as well.
Second issue, why exactly agency is matter? You must start off as a part of the group, but in the end of the day, you are an artist and you want to actually produce something that you make you love. This is why a lot of people decided to leave the group at the point where they feel like they're not actually, the group itself are not following what they actually want. I can give you a lot of examples, but just a simple group example is that literally at the point where like Taeyang decided to actually like not leave group, but like start doing solo artists because of the fact that the group are not following the rap style that he like, the hip hop style that he loves. Our argument is explained to you is that you have a better flexibility in terms of like your creativity and also your agency, your schedule, your amount of songs that you want to produce every single year at the point where you're not tied to a group, because the groups always tie you up in order for them to actually access all of these things. This is important because one, you're able to produce the songs that you love the most, but the amount of money you get means that it will be much higher. But three, that means that your agency and your popularity are not tied to that group, which means that the second the group does something bad, for example, Seungri, that means that you will not get fired as well. This is important because that means that that's when you are able to feel like an artist, which is why the agency of the artist is far better on our side of the house. They did not rebut this, which is why you have to credit this. Finally, how do you ensure the survivability of the group? Again, they did not rebut this, which is why we win immediately. I want to note to you, this is being dynamic. Assuming that you still want to continue with your group in the future, you're able to keep the relevancy of the group, especially in the very competitive K-pop, by leveraging on the solo artists, on the solo activities, which is why you are more likely to ensure that the next comeback with your group will be the one that will be successful because you already continue the relevancy within the market. For all those reasons, agency is the most important thing. They haven't proven to us how exactly we're able to achieve that.
I thank the speaker for the fine remarks. I now invite the opposition whip.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. So, like, one clarification. If all other your members are in the military, obviously the only thing you can do is solo activity. Therefore, there is no criticism to you for doing solo activity if you're the only member left. That's why Mino had no criticism against that. That's why we're willing to support doing subgroups while other members are out. Like, there is no comparative and trade-off in this round. Our premise is that when they come back, we want to proceed as future careers as group. They want to do and continue to do things individual stuff. And they can't say we'll do both and a little of both, and it won't be like that much of a trade-off because the motion says significantly prioritize, which means our fans and other members and the other people will also recognize that there's a change and shift happening in that group strategy. Firstly, agency. Secondly, better possibility of success. Firstly, agency. Notice that there are two types of agency Gov talks about. Firstly is that company ties you to a really bad contract and therefore you can't live your life. Notice this isn't exclusive because there are many K-pop idols that move their company all together. For example, B2B, Mamamoo, Beast, and Highlight. They left their company all together to a new company because they had a conflict with their original company. Therefore, if you don't like the contract, that is not the matter of you being in a group or you being as an individual. That is not comparative in this round. Second, I think a more relevant type of agency to talk about is you are tied to your group's concept, therefore you can't do the music you want. Firstly, I tell you that this is symmetrical because most K-pop idols go to the military in their 30s, which means that at this point in time, they have been active for 10 to 15 years. That's why they try out different concepts throughout that. And the company's commercial incentive is to actually encourage your members to try out different concepts. And therefore, you do have that agency during that period of time. Something that was mentioned at LO, no response whatsoever. Second, during the 10 to 15 years, many idols go to learn to produce their own music. And this is because there's this really celebrity figure called G-Dragon, who was very popular and like was the most popular celebrity throughout the 2010s, and he produced his own music. Therefore, there's this trend in the music industry where idols go on to produce their own music. Therefore, they do have agency in the status quo to a certain level. But even if you don't buy this, two weighing mechanisms from opposition. Firstly, your leverage to do your own music is dependent on your popularity. When you have leverage against your company, when people listen to your music to begin with, that's why if we win the second clash, we win the point about popularity as well. Second, you as an idol, if you chose to become an idol, means that you are more likely to prioritize popularity over your autonomy. To this, GovWeb says that your goals might change throughout time. But notice that there's a life you've lived as the top celebrity for 10 to 15 years. You're already accustomed to being the most successful and popular life. Everyone around you, like PD and staff, was all welcoming you, but when you become less popular, they are no longer treating you the same. You no longer go onto big stages anymore. So sure, when you start to become a solo, you might like the fact that you have agency, but because of the past dependency of the life you've lived up until now, you're likely to feel the massive gap of popularity that accrues on your side of the bench, therefore are likely to regret this choice eventually, therefore making the agency, even if this is a standing argument, should be deprioritized over success. Then success. We told you that there will be a massive backlash against fans due to this policy. And this is crucial because PM's only mechanism as to why you'll be successful going on into the future is that you will galvanize your pre-existing popularity. If we disprove that this continues to exist on that side of the bench, they do not win this debate. They say that fans will support you because you'll be the most popular member in the group. Firstly, that cannot be fiated in this round. You're just a member in this group. There's no information in the info slide that you're the most popular member in the group. Probabilistically and mathematically speaking, only 1 out of 10 members are the most popular out of the group, then there's a really low chance of you becoming the most popular member on that side of the bench. But second, even if you are a popular member, given the Korean context in which we live in a very communitarian and Confucianist culture, a society that does not value individual choice to the extent that we allow individuals to harm the group in society, we think that the likely response is that fans will feel a sense of betrayal. Let me give you an example. Girls' Generation had a really popular member called Jessica, who sang well and was very pretty. When she left the group to do a business on her own, all of Girls' Generation's fans were against this. To this, Gov says, we're not saying that you should leave the group, but firstly, the best way of achieving all your benefits is to leave the group. Second, even if you don't leave the group, the motion requires you to significantly prioritize your solo member working, which means that if you're a fan who likes another member and you want your member to come out and go out to stage, and you are like, oh, why isn't my favorite member coming back? But you see the other popular member doing a lot of good solo works, obviously there is backlash against that and people aren't stupid. This is really important because even if we assume that some fans will support your solo activity, some fans won't, we think that even in a likely scenario where both mixed responses exist, this has a harmful and rippling effect because the Korean celebrity industry has a severe cancel culture in which if there is slight moral error, no TV shows, no festivals want to invite you because they do not want to be attached with the negative connotation you have, even if not all people hate you. If some people hate you, they do not have the incentive to risk inviting you nonetheless. Yes.
If that is true, why Jennie and Kai are very popular with their solo activity?
They don't prioritize their group solo activity over their group. Jennie is in Blackpink and is a very popular member. They do concerts every 6 months. Irrelevant in this debate. Firstly, even if it's not about fan backlash, we told you that there's a limit in skill. Even if you're popular in a group, sometimes you're handsome, but you don't sing well. So you rap well, but you don't sing well, which means that they do not have the capacity to create a good, completed music on that side of the bench in a solo activity. No response whatsoever. Firstly, members won't support you, right? That's the mechanism they had on golf, right? Because it's true that you're talking about a popular member on golf bench, and you know that you can't go on to become popular without this member, and you can't go on stage and do solo activity on yourself because you're not as popular, then you don't like that member prioritizing solo activity because it cuts off your own opportunity, and therefore they don't like this. This is important because the mechanism you heard from Prime Minister is sure, you might get less money, but it's at least not divided. This means that going on into perpetuity, you don't have the chance to come back in the future because once you're name tagged as being a traitor of the group, as being a very individualistic, selfish member, even 10 years later, 15 years later, this name tag will be on you forever, which means that the eternity of income and the popularity you can gain on our side of the bench is something that's not guaranteed on that side of the bench. Even if the popularity of the group someday dies out, if you do your solo activity after the group becomes unpopular and breaks up, that's fine because there is no fan backlash. But when this group is still popular and you voluntarily taken selfish action, nobody is going to like you. And we don't want to take that risk as an individual who's put in 10 and 15 years of practice and work into becoming successful in this industry. Very proud to oppose.
I thank the speaker for the fine remarks. I now invite the of reply.
Hello, assuming that I'm audible. Well, my speech starts in 3, 2, 1. So let's talk about our positive benefits, which is not the popularity and the support that you're going to get. The apocalypse that you're going to demonize by the fans. And the response coming from the government side is to laugh you as a group, and therefore fans are going to criticize you that you're not the real fan if you are criticizing a certain member. The first thing to know is that, yeah, like fans are altruistic to a certain extent, but it's far as the reason why they like a certain group is simply because of the group activities, the certain type of concepts and songs that they portray to the people. And if you are actively trading off that particular group activity that you like, then probably the fans are going to be pissed. They are not like angels. I'm really unsure as to why this particular reason that you like, when that reason is broken, why these people are still going to like you at the end of the day. We also talk about the bias culture as to when a certain member is more liked, especially in a certain group, then probably if this particular member is deprived of this ability to actually perform as a group because of another member, then probably there actually is an incentive for you to criticize that. And we there are a lot of harmful effects because number one, we told you that the internet two-way communication of K-pop industry. Best case scenario, the reasonable scenario in which some people are going to support, some people are going to like criticize you. The criticism is actually going to be much more vibrant and much more visible to you insofar as you are the one who have to look at all of the comments. Certainly the people who have committed suicide in the K-pop industry or have not committed suicide just because everyone was criticizing them. Probably they have looked at criticism and put emphasis upon that. So we talk about that why people K-pop industry in and of itself is quite much risk averse, and therefore there is the like cancel culture or whatnot, which means that insofar as there is some level of criticism that actually leads to these substantially more harms under their set of house. For example, people not calling you to some entertainment shows, whatnot. So I think it's as we are able to prove that some people are going to criticize you. I think we have already had a lot of harms in terms of your popularity. The thing is that I'm also going to support you. Yeah, sure. Because number one, in my LO speech, that there is a communitarian value that these members also internalize, which means that they are going to prioritize activity to a certain extent. But we told you that there is a selfish incentive for you because you actually performing good as a group is now being curtailed under your side of the house, and that's why these people are going to be pissed off. Which means it's going to be less under their side of the house. They're going to be less. That people are going to willing to like let's buy albums, whatnot. I think it's very important because we told you that number one, popularity is actually more important than agency because it's a logically prior prerequisite. This is a precursor for you to have agency at first place because insofar as for you to have a bargaining chip within the corporation, probably you have to give a lot of profit to that corporation, right? Here. And so I think popularity is the important thing because that is the pathway that you have gone through. That was material coming from our side of the house. You have gone through all those processes. You have taken granted for all this large amount of like profit that you have enjoyed for almost like 10 years of your life. Then you now lose that continuously, and probably that is the moment when you feel like you have done something wrong. That's I'm going to talk about agency. I think this claim of agency is symmetric. It's really unsure to what extent that the agency is so much important under their set of house coming from our side weighing. Thing I want to tell you is they simply say that there are more flexibility. Maybe this is true, but I'm going to weigh this argument in comparison to two things. The first about the sustainability of the weighing, the sustainability of agency, because we have told you already, are not popular, probably then you are going to not really have that much of not much of a bargaining chip. We told you as to why even inside the group activity you can exert some level of agency, which means on the president of the house, even if the degree itself is lower, we actually have more sustainable level of agency will happen under your protocol. You might enjoy flexible agency to some extent. Duration is not necessarily going to be high that long, and that's why I think you are going to be curtailed to enjoy the agency, and that benefit is at least short term. For all these reasons, very, very proud to oppose.
I thank the speaker for the final remarks. I now invite the cover plan.
Right. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Three observations that win us the round, and then two bigger picture claims. The first, is success the most important clash in this debate? Maybe. We proved how we get that too. But the bigger question is success important? We think that we frame this out in two ways. First, the info slide says that they are popular already, which means that they're relatively successful either in the group or in the K-pop standing, which means that perhaps they don't make as much if you leave. I'm not conceding, I'm just trying to get this point straight. Even if you buy opposition's characterizations, you don't get poor, which means that this probably doesn't matter that much to this K-pop idol. But secondly, this framing also withstands the attack, because case only works if this person is not the main bias, right? If it is, then therefore we win the entire debate. You have to consider that there's a lot of people in the group, right? And the motion doesn't say you're one or the other, but the motion does say that you are popular. We argued that given that you are considering this option, you already admit that there's some propensity for success, right? Of course, you won't go into a solo career if you know that you're going to fail miserably and die poor. So if the debate is 7 out of 10, you are the bias, then we win 7 out of 10 times. And all bias are not created equal, which means that even if you are not the bias, you will still get fans. We proved that in our speeches. The second observation is we win by sheer responses. Argues mental health is worse. But we flipped that and said that fans actually are so loving of you at any single time you want to do something new and prioritize yourself because of loyalty. So perhaps this new material on Upwhip is true, communitarianism, right? But we outweighed this by virtue of characterization as to how you are a fan, you created that bond that's relative and you are more relatable. Often not, people are not mad at you as a fan, but they're mad at the company as a whole, which means that this argument on up is at best a wash. But secondly, argues that you are a really bad company. We said that this is symmetric. They conceded it, but at the very least, you can opt out. We think that the ability to opt out is relative, so maybe you get more hate on either side of the house than opts arguing, but you get more hate as a group if hate exists on opt. Third response is that they completely dropped this new counterprop on subunit. And the reason why is because we called it out and said this is a cop-out, because you will still be relying on other members, and this was explained by me and GovWhip. But secondly, the reason why this is debate losing is because it harms their actor as well. If they want to be in that particular group, in a subunit, if fans hated you because you are a different group on Gov, they would have hated you still because you're a different group or a subunit in a big group. If Op says that they love the group and don't want to take the reputation or the credibility or artistic pleasure of that particular group, being a subunit would suffer all of those same harms as well. What this proves is Op's claims perhaps may be true, but it happens worse in opposition. Two bigger picture claims. On agency first, we've already proven to you what is the most important part in this debate. The reason why is by sheer framing and weighing as to how absent of agency, you literally just are a shell of a person. And the reason why is if you don't have agency, there's literally nothing to live for, even if you are rich. Opposition plus mitigation is fans would perhaps demand for a change. But we said, but Ops themselves say that they care about the group, right? So why would you demand for a change if everything is going to be similar because you expect something out of the group that is consistent? But this is mitigatory. We argue on two fronts. Firstly, agency is relative. In a group, you'll always be tied down. At least as a solo career, if you cared about your time, your scheduling, then we get that better as a solo artist. If you care about what songs you produce, then we get that better as a solo artist. Which means that whatever your goals may be, maybe it's the characterization that they keep repeating, is that you are a child and you love being a K-pop artist. Maybe it's because you love the sheer joy of fame. Maybe it's because you love the time that you put in. We get all of those things because agency is the principle that underlies all of the things that you want to do on up. What we prove is if the clash is money, we get more money. If the clash is agency and it is agency, we get that most on Gov. For all those reasons, we have to fix.
I thank the speaker for the fine remarks, and I thank all debaters for the extremely high quality round. You'll get to know the result in 10 minutes. See you soon. Judges, please join me in B35 result discussion on Discord.